Welcome to Ancient Relics Keeper. Uncover the hidden secrets of history, from ancient mysteries to lost civilizations. Join us on this thrilling journey. Subscribe and dive into the unknown. Electricity. It is the force that powers our modern world. A discovery we associate with brilliant minds like Benjamin Franklin and Alessandro Volta. But what if they weren't the first? What if, 2,000 years ago, in ancient Mesopotamia, someone else already knew the secret of generating an electric current? In 1938, a strange artifact was discovered near Baghdad that challenged everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. Today, we investigate the Baghdad battery. Was this simple clay pot a primitive battery, proof of lost ancient technology? Or is there a much simpler explanation? Let's switch on the mystery. Before we can plug into the electrifying theories about ancient power and lost technology, we must first get our hands dirty. We must start our investigation not with speculation, but with the object itself. In any mystery, the most important witness is the physical evidence. We need to take the so-called Baghdad battery apart layer by layer to understand exactly what it is that we are looking at. What we find is an object of profound simplicity, yet its construction is so specific, so deliberate, that it seems to hint at a purpose far beyond what a simple clay pot should have. This is not just a piece of pottery. It's a carefully assembled, multi-part device, and each component is a crucial clue in our investigation. Our deconstruction begins with the most visible and unassuming part of the artifact, the outer shell. This is a small terracotta jar, crafted from a light, yellowish clay. It stands approximately 13 centimeters, or about 5 inches, tall, making it small enough to fit comfortably in the palm of your hand. Its shape is that of a simple, undecorated vase, slightly bulbous at the bottom and tapering towards a narrow neck. To an untrained eye, it would be utterly unremarkable. In the vast collections of the Iraq Museum, it could easily be lost among thousands of other similar pots used for storing grain, oil, or wine. It's a humble object, a piece of everyday life from the ancient world. The jar was discovered in 1936 during railway construction in an area called Kujut Rabu, just southeast of modern-day Baghdad in Iraq. The area was once part of the great Mesopotamian civilizations, a cradle of human innovation. Based on the style of the pottery and other artifacts found nearby, archaeologists have attributed the jar to the Parthian Empire, a powerful civilization that ruled the region for nearly 500 years, from roughly 250 BC to 250 AD. The Parthians were skilled warriors and traders, but they are not a civilization that we typically associate with revolutionary scientific discoveries. And yet, it is this simple clay pot from their time that holds the potential to rewrite our understanding of ancient technology. The first strange clue that this is no ordinary pot is at its mouth. The opening is sealed with a thick, black plug made of bitumen. Bitumen is a naturally occurring asphalt, a sticky, waterproof tar that was widely used in ancient Mesopotamia for everything from sealing boats to acting as a mortar for bricks. The presence of this airtight seal immediately tells us something important. Whatever was inside this jar was meant to be protected, sealed away from the outside world. This is where the mystery deepens. Our investigation moves to the second layer, to what lies just beneath that bitumen seal. When we look inside the jar, we find that it's not empty. Held firmly in place by the bitumen plug at the top is a cylinder, meticulously crafted from a single rolled-up sheet of copper. This copper cylinder is roughly 10 centimeters tall and about 2.5 centimeters in diameter, a perfect fit within the clay pot. It is open at the bottom, but the top edge is soldered shut and embedded into the bitumen seal, creating a self-contained vessel suspended inside the larger ceramic jar. The craftsmanship is deliberate. This is not a random piece of scrap metal. It's a purpose-built component, designed to sit perfectly within its pottery housing, creating a container within a container. The choice of copper is also significant. Copper is an excellent electrical conductor, a fact that becomes more and more intriguing as we move deeper into the device. Now we arrive at the very heart of the object, the third layer of our deconstruction. Suspended in the exact center of the copper cylinder is another component, a single, slender iron rod. The top of this iron rod sticks up through the bitumen plug, exposed to the air. The bottom of the rod hangs down inside the copper cylinder. But, and this is a critical detail, it does not touch the copper at any point. It is held in place solely by the bitumen seal at the top, ensuring that it remains perfectly insulated from the surrounding copper sleeve. The iron rod shows significant signs of corrosion, as if it has been subjected to a chemical reaction with some kind of acidic substance over a long period of time. Let's pause and take stock of what we have. We have an outer ceramic insulator, the clay pot. Inside that, we have a copper cylinder. Inside that, perfectly centered and insulated from the copper, we have an iron rod. We have two different, specific types of metal, deliberately arranged so they do not touch, and encased within a sealed container. To anyone with a basic knowledge of science, this arrangement is startlingly familiar. It is, piece for piece, a schematic for a simple electrochemical cell, a primitive battery. The only thing missing is the fourth and final layer, the invisible ingredient that would bring the entire device to life. This final component is the electrolyte. A battery cannot function with just two different metals. It needs a liquid medium that can conduct a charge and facilitate a chemical reaction between them. This liquid is called an electrolyte, and it is typically an acid or an alkaline solution. When the Baghdad battery was discovered, it was empty. But whatever liquid was once sealed inside had long since evaporated or decomposed over the last 2 millennia. However, the ingredients to create a simple electrolyte would have been abundant and readily available in ancient Mesopotamia. Common substances like vinegar, wine that had soured, lemon juice, or even simple grape juice are all acidic enough to work perfectly. The evidence of corrosion on the central iron rod strongly suggests that it was once submerged in just such an acidic liquid. If you were to take this device today and fill the copper cylinder with grape juice or vinegar, an immediate chemical reaction would begin. The two different metals, iron and copper, reacting with the acid in the liquid, would start to produce a small but measurable flow of electrons. They would produce an electric current. The object found in the Iraqi desert is not just a pot. It is a complete, self-contained apparatus. It has all the necessary components, arranged in the exact correct way, to generate electricity. It is an elegant and efficient design for a galvanic cell, a device that was not officially invented until the year 1800 by the Italian scientist Alessandro Volta, nearly 2,000 years after this mysterious object was buried. The question is no longer about the object's potential. The question is about intent. Is it possible that this uncanny resemblance to a battery is just a massive coincidence? Or did a Parthian craftsman, 2 millennia ago, deliberately assemble these four components, the clay, the copper, the iron, and the acidic juice, knowing that this specific combination would unlock a mysterious and invisible power from the heavens? The evidence is on the table, and the implications are, for lack of a better word, shocking. We have now deconstructed the Baghdad battery and laid its components out on the table. A clay pot, a copper cylinder, an iron rod, and the ghost of a missing liquid. On its own, the design is suggestive, an uncanny echo of a modern battery. But to truly understand the shocking theory, we must move from archaeology to chemistry. We must treat this not just as an artifact, but as a functioning machine. The central claim is that this object is a primitive galvanic cell, a device that can generate electricity through a chemical reaction. Is this scientifically plausible? Could this simple clay jar actually work? Let's conduct a thought experiment. rebuilding the battery step by step to see if we can unlock its ancient power. Our experiment begins with the foundational scientific principle, a law of nature that is as true today as it was 2,000 years ago. This is the principle of the electrochemical cell, and it is surprisingly simple. It all starts with two different types of metal. In our case, we have a rod of iron and a cylinder of copper. Every metal has a different electrode potential, which is just a fancy way of saying that some metals are more eager to give up their electrons than others. Iron is a more reactive metal than copper, which means its atoms are much more willing to let go of their tiny, negatively charged electrons. Copper, on the other hand, is more stable and is quite happy to accept new electrons. This difference in their chemical personalities is the key to the entire process. When these two metals are kept separate and dry, nothing happens. They are stable. But the moment you introduce the third component, the electrolyte, everything changes. This brings us to the second step of our experiment, creating the flow of electrons. Let's take our ancient device and fill the copper cylinder with a weak acid, something the Parthians would have had in abundance, like vinegar or grape juice that has just started to ferment. This acidic liquid acts as a conductive medium, a kind of chemical highway that allows the magic to happen. The moment the iron rod and the copper cylinder are submerged in this electrolyte, a chemical reaction begins. The acid in the vinegar starts to dissolve the surface of the more reactive iron rod. As the iron atoms dissolve, they leave their electrons behind. The iron rod now has a surplus of free-floating, negatively charged electrons. It has become what scientists call the anode, or the negative terminal of our battery. At the same time, on the other side of our chemical highway, the less reactive copper cylinder is just sitting there. But the electrolyte is full of positively charged ions from the acid. These positive ions are attracted to the copper cylinder, and they are ready and waiting to accept the free electrons that the iron rod is so eager to give up. The copper cylinder has become the cathode, or the positive terminal. Now we have a situation of profound imbalance. We have a negative charge building up on the iron rod and a positive charge building up on the copper cylinder. Nature abhors this kind of imbalance. The universe wants to find equilibrium, and the only way to do that is for those excess electrons on the iron rod to find a way to get to the copper cylinder. The electrolyte itself, the acidic liquid, provides the path. The electrons begin to flow, moving from the iron through the conductive liquid and over to the copper. This directed, one-way flow of electrons is, by its very definition, an electric current. The simple clay pot has come to life. It is now generating a steady, invisible stream of electrical energy. This flow of electrons leads us to the third crucial step, creating a measurable voltage. The difference in electrical potential between the negative iron rod and the positive copper cylinder creates what we call voltage. Voltage is like electrical pressure. It's the force that pushes the current along. So, how much power could our ancient battery actually produce? This is not just a matter of theory. Numerous researchers, scientists, and television shows have built exact replicas of the Baghdad battery to test this very question. Using the same materials, a clay pot, a copper cylinder, an iron rod, and simple electrolytes like vinegar or grape juice, they have successfully brought the ancient device to life. The results are consistent and fascinating. A single Baghdad battery replica can reliably generate a small but very real electrical voltage, typically somewhere between 0.5 volts and 1.5 volts. To put that in perspective, a modern AA battery that you would put in a remote control has a voltage of 1.5 volts. Our humble Parthian pot can produce a comparable amount of electrical pressure. The amount of current or the volume of electrons flowing is very low, but it is steady and continuous. As long as the chemical reaction continues inside the jar, as long as there is still iron to be corroded, and acid in the electrolyte battery will continue to produce its small but persistent electrical charge. It might not be enough to power a light bulb, but it is undeniably electricity. This brings us to our final step, the proof of concept. The cumulative results of all these modern experiments are clear. The theory is not just plausible. It is scientifically sound and experimentally verified. The device, when constructed as described and filled with a simple organic acid, works. It functions as a battery. This is no longer a matter of debate. The late Wilhelm Koenig, the German archaeologist who first proposed the battery theory in the 1930s, was not a fringe theorist. He was a scientist who recognized a simple electrochemical cell when he saw one. The experiments of modern engineers have proven his initial hypothesis to be correct from a technical standpoint. This fundamentally shifts the nature of our investigation. The central question is no longer, could the Baghdad battery work? The answer to that is a definitive yes. The real, more profound mystery now becomes a question of intent. Is it conceivable that a Parthian craftsman, 2,000 years ago, with no knowledge of electrons or electrochemistry, could have stumbled upon this exact, perfect combination of materials and design entirely by accident? Or did they know exactly what they were doing? Did they, through centuries of trial and error, through the careful, secretive work of ancient alchemists, discover that this specific arrangement of iron, copper, and vinegar could produce a strange, tingling, invisible power? The science is sound. The device works. The only remaining question is whether the ancient Parthians understood what they had created. The shocking theory has passed its scientific test, and now the door is open to an even more tantalizing mystery. If they did have electricity, what in the world did they use it for? We have now established a crucial and startling fact. The Baghdad battery works. The science is sound. This simple clay pot, when filled with a weak acid, can and does produce a steady, low-voltage electric current. This is no longer a fringe theory. It's an experimentally verified reality. But this discovery only deepens the mystery. It opens up a thrilling new line of inquiry. If an ancient civilization possessed a source of electricity, no matter how small, it would have been a revolutionary technology, a power that would have seemed like pure magic. This forces us to ask the most exciting question of all. What did they use it for? What was the application for this ancient electricity? Since the Parthians left us no instruction manual, we must become historical detectives, brainstorming the possibilities. And as we do, a series of fascinating proposals emerge, ranging from sophisticated industrial processes to the subtle manipulations of medicine and religion. The first, and by far the most popular and scientifically credible proposal, is that these batteries were used for a process called electroplating, or more specifically, gilding. This is the art of applying an incredibly thin, even layer of a precious metal, like gold or silver, onto a more common base metal, like copper or bronze. The result is an object that has the magnificent appearance and luster of solid gold, but at a fraction of the cost and weight. The theory suggests that Parthian jewelers and craftsmen, through centuries of experimentation, had developed a rudimentary but effective form of this advanced technique. The process would have been ingenious. A craftsman would take a series of Baghdad batteries and connect them together in a series, linking the iron rod of one to the copper cylinder of the next, to increase the overall voltage and current. They would then prepare a chemical bath, a solution containing dissolved gold, likely a toxic but effective gold cyanide solution derived from fruit pits. The object they wanted to plate, perhaps a small copper statue or a piece of jewelry, would be connected to the negative terminal of their battery array. A piece of pure gold would be connected to the positive terminal. Both items would then be submerged in the golden bath. The electric current flowing from the batteries would then work its chemical magic. It would strip tiny particles of gold from the positive source and deposit them, atom by atom, onto the surface of the copper object. Over several hours, a perfect, seamless, and durable layer of gold would form. Proponents of this theory point to a few specific artifacts from the period that seem to support it. There are several small statues and pieces of jewelry that appear to be gilded in a way that, some argue, is too fine and even to have been achieved by the more common ancient method of fire gilding, which involved using a mercury amalgam and was often thicker and less uniform. The electroplating theory provides a neat, elegant solution to this puzzle. It suggests a level of chemical and metallurgical sophistication in the ancient world that we are only just beginning to appreciate. It paints a picture of ancient workshops, not with hammering blacksmiths, but with quiet, patient alchemists, using the silent, invisible power of their clay pot batteries to turn copper into what looked like solid gold. But perhaps the application was not industrial, but biological. Our second proposal moves from the jeweler's workshop to the healer's tent, suggesting a medical purpose for this ancient electricity. Ancient people were incredibly astute observers of the natural world. They were well aware of natural sources of electricity. They knew of the strange, numbing power of the torpedo ray, an electric fish found in the Mediterranean Sea. In fact, ancient Greek and Roman physicians, like Scribonius Largus, documented using these electric fish to treat a variety of ailments, from headaches to gout. They would place the live fish on a patient's head or feet, and the electric shock would numb the pain. They had no idea what electricity was, but they knew that this strange, tingling energy had a powerful effect on the human body. The theory, therefore, is that the Baghdad battery was a man-made version of the torpedo ray. Healers and priests, perhaps by accident, may have discovered that their strange pots could produce a similar tingling or shocking sensation when touched in the right way. A person holding a damp cloth and touching both the iron rod and the copper cylinder would feel a distinct, buzzing tingle. This sensation could have been seen as a powerful healing force, a form of divine energy or life force that could be channeled into a patient. It could have been used as a form of electroacupuncture, with needles connected to the battery's terminals to stimulate points on the body. Or it could have simply been used as a pain relief device, a primitive TENS machine, to distract the nervous system and dull the sensation of chronic pain. In this scenario, the batteries were not about creating beautiful objects, but about alleviating human suffering through a mysterious, magical force that only the most skilled healers knew how to harness. This idea of a magical, divine force leads us to our third major proposal, that the batteries were used not for practical purposes, but for a more theatrical and religious one. Imagine an ancient temple in Parthian Babylon. A crowd of worshippers has gathered before a magnificent bronze statue of a god or goddess. The priest tells them that the statue is alive, that it is filled with the spirit of the deity. To prove it, he invites a worshipper to step forward and touch the sacred idol. As the person's hand makes contact with the cool metal, they feel a sudden, sharp tingle, an inexplicable shock that jolts through their body. The crowd gasps. It is a miracle. The god is truly present. This is the theory of the magic box. It suggests that clever priests could have hidden a series of interconnected Baghdad batteries inside a hollow metal statue. The statue itself would be connected to one terminal, and a specific insulated spot on the statue would be connected to the other. When an unsuspecting worshipper touched both points, they would complete the circuit and receive a small but startling electric shock. It would be a powerful and convincing illusion, an irrefutable sign of divine power for a population with no concept of electricity. It could also be used to create seemingly magical effects with smaller objects. A priest could present a holy chalice or box that would give a tingle to anyone who held it, proving it was a sacred relic. In this view, the Baghdad battery was an instrument of power, not for plating gold or healing the sick, but for controlling the minds and securing the devotion of the faithful through carefully orchestrated miracles. These three theories are all tantalizing, but we must also consider the leading counterargument, A fourth proposal that suggests the object had a much simpler, non-electrical purpose. This theory proposes that the Baghdad battery wasn't a battery at all. It was, in fact, a sacred vessel designed for the protection and storage of important scrolls. In the ancient world, important religious texts, magical incantations, or legal documents were often written on fragile materials like papyrus or parchment. Protecting these scrolls from moisture and decay was a major concern. According to this theory, the construction of the object makes perfect sense as a high-quality scroll jar. A sacred scroll would be wrapped tightly around the central iron rod. This entire assembly would then be slid into the protective copper cylinder. The copper would prevent the scroll from being crushed and would also, some have argued, have mild antibacterial properties. Finally, the entire container would be placed inside the sturdy clay pot, and the top would be sealed with waterproof bitumen. This would create a secure, weatherproof, and long-lasting container, perfectly designed to preserve a precious text for posterity. Similar, though less complex, scroll jars have been found in other parts of the ancient Middle East, most famously at Seleucia, another Mesopotamian city. This theory is elegant because it requires no great leaps of faith. It explains the object's construction using known technologies and known cultural practices. The corrosion on the iron rod could be easily explained by the decomposition of the acidic papyrus scroll over 2,000 years. In this view, the uncanny resemblance to a battery is just a remarkable and misleading coincidence. So, what was the true application? Was it a sophisticated tool for ancient industry, a lost device of ancient medicine, a clever trick for ancient priests, or simply a well-made container for a forgotten sacred text? Each theory presents a compelling vision of our ancient past, and each one forces us to re-examine what we think we know about the people who lived 2 millennia ago. The mystery of the Baghdad battery is not just about what it is, but about the incredible range of possibilities it represents. We have now explored the incredible possibilities. The Baghdad battery could have been the power source for a lost form of electroplating, a tool for ancient medicine, or a device for creating religious miracles. The theories are tantalizing, and the science behind them is plausible. It is easy to get swept up in the vision of a technologically advanced Parthian empire. But a good investigator knows that a compelling theory is not enough. A case is not built on what could have happened. It is built on what the evidence can prove. And when we apply this rigorous standard to the Baghdad battery theory, we encounter a profound and troubling problem. It's not a problem with the evidence we have, but with the evidence that is conspicuously and completely missing. It's time to open the cold case file and examine the 4 crucial missing pieces that make the case against the battery theory so compelling. Our first piece of missing evidence is the most fundamental and the most obvious: the wires. Let's assume for a moment that the Parthians had indeed created these clever little batteries. A battery on its own is useless. It is a source of potential energy, but to do any work, that energy must be channeled and directed. In the modern world, we do this with wires. Wires are the bridges that carry the electrical current from the battery to the device we want to power. To electroplate a statue, you would need wires to connect the batteries to the gold and to the statue. To create a tingling idol, you would need wires running from the hidden batteries to the surface of the statue. To use it for medical acupuncture, you would need wires connected to needles. And yet, in the entire archaeological record of Mesopotamia, we have found no trace of anything that could be definitively identified as electrical wiring from this period. No fine copper or silver wires have been found alongside the Baghdad batteries. No artifacts have been discovered with strange terminals or connection points. There are no tools in any excavated workshop that look like they were designed for working with electrical components. This is a massive hole in the theory. It's like finding a collection of ancient, perfectly preserved car engines, but with no evidence that the civilization had ever invented the wheel or the drive shaft. Without a method of transmission, the power source is an isolated curiosity. Proponents have suggested they might have used organic materials that have since rotted away. But this is pure speculation. The hard, archaeological fact is that the wires are missing. This leads us to our second, and equally significant piece of missing evidence: the supporting artifacts. If a technology like electroplating existed, it would not have existed in a vacuum. It would have been part of an entire industrial ecosystem, a toolkit of related objects and materials. Finding a single battery is like finding a single mysterious screw. To prove there was a carpenter, you need to find the hammer, the saw, and the workbench. If Parthian jewelers were routinely electroplating objects, we should expect to find the rest of their toolkit. We should be finding the remnants of their plating baths, the ceramic or glass containers that held the gold cyanide solutions. We should be able to find chemical residues of these toxic solutions in the soil of excavated workshops. We should find the anodes they used, the leftover scraps of gold or silver that were consumed in the process. Most importantly, we should find a significant number of electroplated artifacts. The theory suggests this was a known technique, yet the number of potential examples cited by proponents is incredibly small, perhaps only 1 or 2 debatable items. And even these are highly contested. Mainstream metallurgists have examined these artifacts and concluded that their gilding is perfectly consistent with more conventional, well-documented ancient techniques like fire gilding using a mercury amalgam. There is no single, undisputed smoking gun artifact that could only have been made by electroplating. The entire technological infrastructure that would need to surround a functioning battery-powered industry is completely absent from the archaeological record. We have the alleged power source, but we have none of the tools, none of the workshops, and almost none of the products. The third missing piece is, for many historians, the most damning of all. We are missing the written record. The civilizations of Mesopotamia, from the Sumerians to the Babylonians to the Parthians, were obsessive record keepers. They invented writing. Their societies were built on the power of the written word. They left behind hundreds of thousands of clay cuneiform tablets, detailing every imaginable aspect of their lives. They wrote down their laws, their business transactions, their poetry, their religious myths, their medical procedures, and their detailed astronomical observations. They recorded the movements of the planets with painstaking accuracy. They wrote down recipes for beer and instructions for farming. They wrote about everything. And yet, in this vast, comprehensive library of ancient life, there is not one single tablet, not one scroll, not one inscription that mentions electricity. There is no word in their language for battery. There are no instructions on how to build one. There are no chemical formulas for an electrolyte solution. There are no records of a jeweler selling an electroplated amulet. There are no warnings from a physician about the dangers of receiving too strong a tingle. The discovery and application of a fundamental force of nature like electricity would have been revolutionary. It would have been seen as a form of powerful magic, a gift from the gods. It is simply inconceivable that a literate, record-keeping society would make such a monumental discovery and then never, ever write it down. The silence from the scribes is deafening. It suggests that the phenomenon of electricity, as a controllable force, was simply not a part of their known world. This brings us to our final piece of missing evidence, a more practical problem that we can call the wow factor. As we've established, a single Baghdad battery produces a very small amount of power, around 1 volt. This is enough to create a slight tingle on the tongue or perhaps to plate a very small object very, very slowly. But to achieve the more dramatic effects described in the Theoriesto, create a startling shock in a life-size statue, or to perform efficient electroplating on larger items, you would need significantly more power. The only way to achieve this would be to connect many batteries together in a series, just like we do today. Linking 10 batteries together would produce 10 volts, a much more noticeable and useful force. But just like the wires, we have absolutely no evidence that the Parthians ever did this. The handful of battery jars that have been found were all discovered as single, isolated units. We have never found a collection of them wired together. We have never found a rack or a container designed to hold a series of them in place. The concept of creating a battery bank seems to have been completely unknown. Without this ability to scale up the power, the practical applications of the Baghdad battery become extremely limited. The power of a single pot is, frankly, underwhelming. It's not enough to be a convincing weapon, a powerful medical device, or a truly miraculous special effect. It remains a low-power curiosity. The lack of any evidence for these scaled-up power sources suggests that even if they had discovered the principle, they never managed to turn it into a truly impactful technology. When we assemble all these missing pieces, the missing wires, the missing tools, the missing written records, and the missing wow factor, the case for the Baghdad battery as a widely used, intentional technology begins to look very weak. While the pot itself is a fascinating puzzle, the world around it shows no trace of an electrical age. The circumstantial evidence against the theory is overwhelming. The silence of the artifacts, and the silence of the scribes, tells a powerful story of its own. We have reached the end of our investigation. We have deconstructed the artifact, explored the science, brainstormed the applications, and confronted the profound lack of supporting evidence. The case of the Baghdad battery is now before us, and it is time for a final verdict. After weighing all the arguments, where do we land? Was this simple clay pot truly a source of ancient electricity, a testament to a lost technology? Or is the truth something far simpler, and perhaps in its own way even more fascinating? Let's consider the final possibilities. The first possibility is that we take the evidence at face value. We can declare that yes, it was a battery. In this verdict, we embrace the shocking theory. We conclude that the design of the object, the two different metals, perfectly insulated from each other, sealed within a ceramic yari, is simply too specific, too perfect, to be a coincidence. It is an exact schematic for a galvanic cell. To believe it was anything else, proponents would argue, is to ignore the clear evidence of clever design. In this view, we must accept that the ancient Parthians, or perhaps an earlier Mesopotamian culture, through centuries of alchemical experimentation, discovered the principle of the electrochemical cell. They were brilliant innovators who created a technology nearly 2,000 years ahead of its time. The reason we don't find wires or written records is simply because they have been lost to the ravages of time, or perhaps because this knowledge was a closely guarded secret, known only to a small guild of elite craftsmen or a priestly caste. This verdict asks us to believe in the genius of our ancestors and to accept that there are still profound gaps in our understanding of the ancient world. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the second possibility, the verdict favored by most mainstream archaeologists. This verdict states that no, it was not a battery. It was a scroll jar. This is the simplest and most conservative explanation, the one that requires no great leaps of faith. It argues that the object's construction is perfectly explained by the known cultural practices of the time. The need to protect sacred or valuable scrolls was real. A clay pot, a protective inner copper cylinder, and a waterproof bitumen seal is an excellent and logical design for achieving this purpose. The central iron rod would have served as a spindle to keep the rolled-up papyrus or parchment from collapsing. In this view, the object's uncanny resemblance to a battery is a pure, remarkable, and ultimately misleading coincidence. The corrosion on the iron rod is not from an electrolyte like vinegar, but from the natural acids produced by the decomposing scroll paper over 2 millennia. This verdict is neat, it is logical, and it fits within our established understanding of ancient technology. It closes the case by declaring it a case of mistaken identity. Both of these verdicts are compelling in their own way. One offers the thrill of lost technology, while the other offers the comfort of a simple, logical explanation. But perhaps the truth is not found at either of these two extremes. Perhaps the most fascinating answer lies in the middle ground. This leads us to our third, and perhaps most intriguing possible verdict, that the Baghdad battery was both a scroll jar and a battery, but that its electrical properties were discovered entirely by accident. Let's explore this accidental battery theory. It begins with the mainstream explanation. A scribe or priest creates a high-quality vessel to store a sacred scroll. They wrap the papyrus scroll around the iron spindle, place it in its copper sheath, seal it in the jar with bitumen, and store it away in a temple library. For years, the object functions perfectly as a scroll jar. But over time, the organic papyrus inside begins to slowly decompose. As it breaks down, it releases weak organic acids, the same kind of acids found in vinegar or fruit juice. This acidic liquid, a byproduct of decay, slowly fills the container and saturates the space around the iron rod and the copper cylinder. Unknowingly, the ancient scribe has now created the one missing ingredient, the electrolyte. The scroll jar, through a slow, natural process, has accidentally transformed itself into a fully functional battery. Now, let's say a priest goes to retrieve the sacred text from the temple storage. He picks up the jar, which might be slightly damp from the internal moisture. As he holds it, his thumb touches the exposed iron rod at the top, while the palm of his hand is touching the damp clay pot, which is in contact with the inner copper cylinder. In that instant, his body completes the circuit. He feels a sudden, strange, and inexplicable tingle. It's not a powerful shock, just a faint, buzzing, alive sensation. What would he think? He would have no concept of electrons or voltage. He would not think, "Ah, I have discovered electricity." He would think, "This sacred object is filled with a magical power. It holds the energy of the gods." From that day forward, the object would no longer be just a container. It would become a holy relic, an object of immense religious significance, precisely because of its accidental electrical properties. The story of the living jar would spread. Other priests might try to replicate it, perhaps discovering that adding a little sour wine or vinegar to the jar makes the magic stronger. They would be using electricity without ever understanding it. They would be interacting with a fundamental force of nature, but interpreting it through a lens of magic and religion. This final theory is beautiful because it reconciles all the evidence. It explains the object's construction in a logical, non-controversial way as a scroll jar, while also honoring the undeniable fact that the object can and does produce electricity. It also elegantly explains the profound lack of supporting evidence. The reason there are no wires, no written schematics, and no electroplating workshops is because the Parthians never developed a technology of electricity. They had only discovered a phenomenon. They had found a strange property of a single type of sacred object, but they never made the intellectual leap to understand the science behind it, to harness it, and to apply it in a systematic technological way. This leads us to our final thought, the ultimate verdict on the Baghdad battery's place in history. The artifact forces us to make a crucial distinction between knowledge and understanding. It is entirely possible for a culture to have knowledge of a phenomenon, to know that if you combine these specific things, a magical tingle is produced without ever having a true scientific understanding of why it happens. The story of the Baghdad battery, whether it was a deliberate invention or a sacred accident, is a powerful symbol of this very idea. It is a humble clay pot that contains a universe of mystery. It challenges our assumptions about the linear progression of history and reminds us that the past is a far stranger and more complex place than we can ever fully know. It serves as a permanent, tantalizing question mark in our history books, a quiet testament to the sparks of genius and perhaps sheer luck that have illuminated the long journey of human discovery. So, was the Baghdad battery a deliberate source of ancient electricity, or a sacred scroll jar that accidentally produced a magical tingle? The historical jury is still out. Without wires or written records, the case for ancient electricity remains circumstantial. But the object itself, with its uncanny resemblance to a modern battery, continues to challenge our assumptions. It serves as a humble clay pot filled with a powerful idea, that our ancestors may have been far more clever than we give them credit for, and that there are still secrets and sparks of mystery buried beneath the sands of time. Thanks for exploring history's mysteries with Ancient Relics Keeper. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. What secret should we unravel next? Stay curious and see you soon.